One of the questions about network TV shows is who ultimately has creative control. That is, who gets to decide what actors are hired for the show, what the characters are going to be on the show, what the plots of the shows are going to be about, and so on. And in the early years of TV, it was the advertiser or the sponsor of the show that largely had this control. That was because in the early years of network TV in the 1950s, most TV shows had one advertiser. So basically, you had one car company or one company that made toothpaste that was the only sponsor for the show. So that gave the advertiser a great deal of creative control over how the show would sound and look. Now, television networks didn't really like this situation. They wanted to have more control over the content of the show. And so they thought a lot about how they could gain more control over the content of their own shows. The way they did this was to make their shows longer. In the early years of TV, most shows were roughly 15 minutes. That was a carryover from radio. And for that length of time, a company could afford to sponsor the whole show. But the TV networks thought, well, listen, if we make the shows longer, they're going to be more expensive, and ultimately that meant that that it became much more difficult for any one company to sponsor a whole show. So instead, what they did was this meant that the networks could sell advertising time on a particular show, and they could have multiple advertisers sponsor a show. That undermined the power of any one advertiser to have complete control over a show. And the networks pursued this policy in other ways as well, by having more expensive, longer specials, what were called the spectaculars, featuring, sketch comedy, musical performances, and so on. And these specials that would be an hour long or 90 minutes were also much more expensive, and again, prevented any one advertiser from sponsoring the entire show. So that meant that the network there too would sell time on these shows to many different advertisers. Now, of course, advertisers still had influence over shows, but it wasn't quite as extensive as when there were sole sponsors for particular shows. This figure shows us the most successful genres of television shows over the past 10 years or so. And I think there's a couple of things that are really striking about this chart. Um, in particular, it's really, really interesting to look at the success of reality television over the past 10 years. You'll notice that in the first season on this chart, in the 2001-2002 season, reality TV started to become very successful with, roughly 20% of the shows in this genre. But very quickly, over the next 10 years or so, reality TV became even more successful, and it looks like in many of the years, more than half of the shows on TV were in the reality TV genre. The other thing that I think is really notable about this figure is the decreasing success of situation comedies. I mean, wow. When you think about it, if you go back further in history with the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, during those previous decades, situation comedy was one of the most successful genres for network television. And you see that in the first year on this figure, in the 01-02 season, sitcoms comprised roughly a little more than 1/3 of all television shows on the air. But wow, what a quick decline from 38% in 01-02 to 17% in 02-03 to that genre becoming almost completely eclipsed in later seasons throughout this past decade. It made a brief emergence in the 08-09 season with 7.4% of shows being sitcoms, but other than that, it's almost, that genre is almost completely absent. So it's interesting to look at shifting audience tastes and network programming over the past 10 years in favor of reality TV, while situation comedies are almost completely eclipsed. In the 1950s, the TV networks would often present what are called anthology dramas. These would be shows where the networks would present live performances of plays that had been shown on Broadway's or in the theater. These dramas were really, really critically acclaimed and dealt with some very controversial material like poverty, war, racial discrimination, prejudice. But what's interesting is that the networks, after some time, abandoned this genre of the anthology drama because of its very subject matter. The networks found that these dramas, the live performance of these plays, that the subject matter was often pretty downbeat and depressing, and they came to discover that that was not conducive to the upbeat atmosphere that advertisers wanted to sell their products. That ads would advertisers wanted to sponsor shows that would have a very, sunny, cheery frame of mind that would put people in the mood to consider buying their products that were advertised. When you'd have these dramas that would be a very thoughtful consideration of the darker side of life, like poverty and homelessness, that didn't put people in that buying mood to buy products that advertisers were trying to sell. And I think this raises some broader issues about how networks are always very concerned about the interests of advertisers and trying to create a mood and a sensibility in their programming that is conducive to advertisers' interests.